All right, so to get started here, I'm just going to show you a couple of different layouts, and then we are going to build out one of these. There are 3 essential steps that you need to follow in order to really construct your page in HTML once you have this design. So the first step is to build your structure in HTML. The second step is to add images and links. And the third step is to format all of your text and body elements within the page. So all of these different layouts that I have here were all created with PowerPoint shapes. So there's nothing fancy. It's all just using the different formatting tools in here and everything like that. So this is not the most professional way to create images, but for just getting started, this is totally fine. So you can use these, and we're going to export these images right out of PowerPoint and create them so that you can use them inside of your site. So the first thing you need to do with HTML is decide on your structure. And typically, modern HTML sites all use cascading style sheets to position different elements, but there's a shortcut you can use as a beginner that really simplifies this whole entire process. So that's what we're going to use tonight. And that's actually using a transparent table in your document to organize all of your content. So what you want to do is basically decide what your table needs to be. So the first step is to look at how many rows and columns you need in your table. So here, the banner across the top is going to be your first row. If you look, this navigation panel right here and this content all sort of align in the same row there. So that's going to be a second row. And what you don't see on this design is we need a third row where we're going to put in a disclaimer. In this disclaimer, because this site is going to be live on the web, you want to make sure that everyone knows that no actual travel is being offered, no vacations are actually for sale, and this is an educational project. By putting this as an educational project, it's going to indemnify you if there are any fair use violations. Typically, you're covered under educational use for a lot of different media and things like that. You should always look for royalty-free media, and the website that I'm going to show you tonight for the videos is all royalty-free, and it's self-citing so that you don't even have to worry about citations of the media. But it's really important to add that educational element so that everyone knows that it is under fair use. So for this particular layout where we've got the navigation on the left-hand side where it lines up with the content, we're going to need 3 rows and 2 different columns. One column is going to be for the navigation. The other column is going to be a general area for all of that content that you see. So if you are using Dreamweaver, what you want to do is start by creating a new file, and you're just going to choose a blank HTML page. In Dreamweaver, what I really recommend is that you use the split setting. You can use code setting, which is pure code, split, which shows the code and the design, or just purely design. I really recommend split so that you can start to familiarize yourself with what's happening and where the different elements are going. Right. So our first step in creating this, we want to save our file. The home page for any website is always either index.htm or index.html. So what I'm going to do is navigate here to a project folder that I have set aside called Sample Project. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to save this as index.html. So now every server in the world is programmed to look for index.htm or index.html as a first page whenever it opens up a folder. So when you get this live, you don't have to redirect your server or anything. It'll find index.html automatically. The next thing that a lot of people overlook is adding in a title. You can either do that in the code with the title tag, or you can just type it into this little title box up here. So we're going to call this Express Holiday Travel. And you'll notice over here in the code that this updates whenever you type in here. So now the next step is actually to add in our tables. So to do that, we're going to use the Insert menu and we're going to insert a table. So we want 3 rows and 2 columns. Now, as far as the table width, what you generally want to accommodate is the standard screen size. W3C maintains log of what the average computer user is using for their display resolution, which is what you should conform to in your page so that you are serving the general population. So right now they said that the screen width is typically 1024. So we're going to set our table width at 1000 to make sure that we can accommodate that easily. So you don't have to use exactly 1024. You could actually use less than that if you want. But we're going to go with the standard width and go with 1000 pixels. Now the border thickness, we want this table to be invisible. So we're going to set the thickness, the cell padding, and the cell spacing all to 0 so that we can line our elements up as precisely as we want. And as I said, in here, typically you would do all of these with div tags and with cascading style sheets, but just getting started, this is really the easiest way to go. So we are going to insert this table right here, and now you'll see you've got this blank table right here. Now, for the banner, we don't need 2 columns. Was there a question?
Okay. Yes, on that other thing, you used no header?
Yes, I did not use it.
Before you went to this screen?
No, I did not use a header.
Really? Okay.
So a table header will identify a row in your table that is actually set aside for headings, and it'll format it differently. So we don't want that. We want this table to basically disappear into the background like it's not even there. So to create the banner structure, we're going to merge these cells. So if you just highlight both of them, you can actually go to Table and then Merge Cells. And what this is going to do, that's going to create one cell, and this is where our banner is going to go. And you can go ahead and type this information in there so you know what we're using. So over here you're going to have navigation, and in here you're going to have content. So all of these things are going to end up getting updated as we build out this page. The one element that's going to remain that you're really going to have to focus on your own is the content. But the nice thing is you can embed tables within tables. It's called nesting. So you can add another table in there if you want to format elements within your content. This bottom one is going to be our disclaimer. So we are going to merge cells here, and we're just going to go ahead and type out our disclaimer right now. So this is an educational project. No actual travel is offered or advised. Okay. So now we're just going to save this. So this is actually the first part of our task for the night done. We have established the structure of our page. So the next step is to add in images and links. So, of course, in order to add in an image, you have to create an image. So that's going to be our next step. So I'm going to take this image straight out of PowerPoint. And what you can do here is if you have Paint installed, you can actually just select all of these different elements together. It'd be easier if I just select all of them like this. Now I should be able to copy this and paste it directly into Paint. So there's my image right there. Now all I have to do is use these little grip points to size this however I want. And there we go. So now I'm going to save this, do a save as, and JPEG is a really good format to choose for any kind of image that you want, unless it's got really wide areas of the same color, because then it is going to blur. So what I'm going to do is go back to my project folder under sample project. Now, typically what you would have is a separate folder for all of your media where you would actually identify within the page, you know, this goes to the media folder, You might have your HTML in a separate folder, but for just getting started, I suggest you put everything in the main project folder. It's going to make everything very, very easy. So I'm going to call this banner.jpg. So the JPEG is actually already going to be there for me. So it's going to be banner.jpg. It'll save my project and format. And now I'm going to go back over to Dreamweaver. And in place of banner, I'm going to delete that text because I don't need it. And I'm going to insert an image. And the image that I'm going to insert is the one that I just created. So I'm going to choose banner, click OK. Now it's going to prompt me for an alternate text. Alternate text is what displays when an image is not shown in a browser. So if someone is visually impaired, their browser will actually read this alternate text to them rather than display the image that they obviously could not see. So this I'm going to call Express Holiday Travel Banner. This long description is not necessary, but if you wanted to actually describe the image and the content that was within it so that the visually impaired browser could read that, you could add a text description as a reference here, but we're not going to do that. We just need to add in the alternate text. So there is our banner. Now you can see that the width of that is 928 pixels down here at the bottom. These are all your attributes for the tag. So you can set classes, you can set the width, the height, all of these different things down here. So right now, 928 is actually very reasonable. So for that, we are still within our table boundaries, and we're all set. So I'm going to click Save. Now, the one thing that you want to watch out for is this source. You want to make sure that the source is pointing relative to the page, and it doesn't have C:// and then your desktop path. Otherwise, when you upload all of these files to your server in week 5, your images aren't going to work because it's going to look for them on your desktop and it can't reach your desktop. So you want to make sure that the source is just the image name itself, or if you do add a media folder, that it's media / the name of the file itself. That's going to be the best way to go about this. Now, the next image that we need to create is for our navigation. This one is going to be a little bit more complicated because this navigation has a lot of text in it. And what we actually want is for that text to be typed out in the web page itself rather than part of this. So we are going to actually delete all of the text here, and then we're going to follow the same process. We're going to copy this image directly out of PowerPoint. We're going to paste it into Paint, and then we're going to use this little resize bar to move it around. So there, now we have our navigation panel. So I'm going to save this again as a JPEG, and I'm going to call it Nav. So in here, in my navigation, I'm going to delete this text. And this is where it's actually going to get a little bit complicated. So what we're going to do is actually put this image in the background of this table cell. But in order to figure out how big the table cell should be, we actually need to insert the image first. So there's a little bit of complexity to this. The first thing we're going to do is insert that image that we just created, nav. Our alternate text, we can just type in navigation. We're actually going to delete this out of here, so this is just going to be a placeholder. Now, the whole point of this is to see the width and height that we want for this table cell. So in here, we actually are going to go into the code that's right beside it and click that TD. So in here, that TD, we are going to set our width equal to the same width that we have for the image. So that's going to be 233. You can see the width here for the image and the width for the table cell are the same. And I'm going to do the same thing with the height. I'm going to set the height to 177. Now, this is going to become clear in just a little bit, but for right now you might not understand why we're doing this. We're doing this so that that table cell takes up exactly as much space as it needs to. So whenever you set a width, the one thing that you'll find is that the table cell won't always adjust unless you alter the width of another cell beside it. So it's not going to condense itself. It'll take up as much space as it's given, but it'll take up, at minimum, the width that you give it. So the cell beside it, we're going to say width 100%. So what that does is that forces this content panel to try and expand as much as it can. So it's going to push back against our little navigation panel, and our navigation panel will only take up 233 pixels. Does that make sense so far?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So now, this is where it gets tricky. We're going to click on this image, and we're going to delete it. So the reason we do that is because we're actually going to type in our text in here for our different navigation options, and then we're going to add that image back in using cascading style sheets. So the first thing is...
Well, let me ask you, how did you actually delete that? The words on there? You went over to the code?
No. Wait, the words on...
I mean the image.
Oh, I just clicked on the image.
Okay.
I just did a left click, and then I hit the delete key.
Okay.
That took the image away. So I'm going to add my different vacation options. So these are all actually going to become links here shortly. Now, these are my 4 options, and then the 5th page is the home page. So I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to save my work. It's important to save often. So now what we're going to do is create links for each of these. Now, if you remember back in your PowerPoint, you should have constructed a sitemap. The sitemap should have the names of the different files that you're going to use for each of these pages. So that's why it was important to establish a file name for this. Now we can go back into Dreamweaver, and we already know what these are going to be called. So I can use my little toolbar over here and just click Hyperlink. Now, the text should already appear because it's already been highlighted, and then the link is going to be chart.html. Now, this page doesn't exist right now, but we're going to create it shortly because we're going to clone this index page into all the other pages of our site. But that's going to come later once we've got all of our formatting done. But based on that sitemap, you should already know what all these pages are going to be called. So you can go ahead and create your navigation. So creating a hyperlink is as easy as that. So you just select this, and you choose hyperlink. You can also go up to the Insert menu and choose hyperlink from that. So I'll show you where that is in just a second. So if you go up to Insert, you can choose hyperlink right there. So the next one that we're going to do is treasure hunting. And I actually just resized my... Okay, so the link here is going to be treasure.html. And then finally, oops, should be that whole thing is one. So the link here is going to be treasure.html. And then the final one, the link is going to be contact.html. And as I said, none of these pages exist right now, but they will. So, okay. So here we have all of our hyperlinks done. We've got our images created. So we are at the second stage completed. So our final stage is just to format and arrange all of our different elements. So this is where we add cascading style sheets. Cascading style sheets are incredibly handy and incredibly useful. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new style. So Dreamweaver does a great job of managing all of this for you. So it's really just a matter of adding in different things. So for this, what we're going to do is base it on a tag. So the tag that we're going to use is the A tag. If you notice in the code on the left here, all of those hyperlinks that we added A tags. A stands for anchor. So back in the days of Netscape, they used a lot of nautical terminology. So the A became the anchor tag, and that's how you hyperreference or hyperlink to different files. So by setting a class for the A tag, it means that whenever we have a link in our page, it's going to format it just like this. So you choose the A tag and make sure it says tag up here and then click OK. Now it's going to come up with a prompt for us. So font family is the type of font that we want. So I'm going to say Arial, sans serif. You can add multiple different fonts in here separated by a comma, and what it does is it'll look for the first font in the list, and if it finds it, it'll use it. And if it doesn't, then it'll look at the next font in the list. Sans serif and serif are the default fonts. Sans serif means it doesn't have any of the little text decorations on it, and serif means that it does. So Arial is a very common sans serif font. Times New Roman is a very common serif font. The font size that we're going to use for our links, we're going to say it's 10-point font. You can change the values here. Pixels is actually the number of pixels on the screen that it takes up. Point is regular font point size, just like you use in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. So under here I'm going to say text decoration none, and what that means is that my text will not have an underline under it. And that's really important if you want. That's the only way to get rid of an underline for a hyperlink. You can keep the underline, but for us to have the same kind of effect that we had here in the design for this, we want to make that text decoration none. So I'm going to click OK, and now you'll notice that it applies automatically within the page, which is exactly what we wanted. So now I'm going to create a new style. And for this, I'm going to do it for the TD tag. And that's going to apply to all of our TD tags in this whole thing. So font family, I'm going to select the same thing. I'm going to say Arial. Sans serif. Font size, I'm going to set it to 10 point. And then I'm going to set my alignment so that the text will align left. Here, let me go down to block. So vertical align, we want this to be top so that it's at the top of that table cell, and the text align, we want it to be left. So it's going to be at the top left corner, just like if we had started creating a new element. The default for a table is to align left and align in the middle vertically. So down here at the box, I'm going to set a little bit of padding. So what this means is our text is not going to be right up against the margin. So I'm going to say that this is going to be 8 pixels of padding. Now what this means is our content will start 8 pixels in all directions, but with that same for all. So then I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and you'll notice everything updates again. Make sense so far?
Yes. Yeah. I'm making a few little notes here, but yeah.
Okay.
I can remember all this. I'll do good. But it's real interesting how this works.
So now I'm going to save this again. Now, the next step is we are going to create specific classes. We're going to create 2 different classes here, and we're going to have to add div tags in so that they can be applied. So the first one is for our disclaimer, because we want our disclaimer to be a little bit different. We want it to sort of fade into the background, but where it can still be read. So for this, we want to define a class. A class does not necessarily apply to any specific tag. It has to be invoked. So I'm going to call this class disclaim. And then I'm going to click OK. Now, I'm defining a new class which isn't invoked anywhere on the page. So after we finish this, you're not going to see any changes on the page. It actually has to be actively called up. So for this, I'm going to say font family Arial, sans serif. The font size in this case, I'm going to say it's going to be 8-point font because we want this to be smaller and kind of out of the way. So we're going to set a different color for this too. The color we're going to set is going to be a sort of a gray color so that just sort of fades into the background a little bit. We still want it there, but we want it in the background. And then the next thing I'm going to do is set my alignment. We want this to be centered. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and you'll notice that nothing changes because that class isn't used anywhere in the document yet. So this is where we're going to have to go into the code a little bit. So I'm going to create a div tag in the code. I'm going to create a div tag in the code right here, and then I'm going to have to close that div tag. So you can think of HTML tags as switches where you turn them on and then you turn them off, and anything that you turn on you have to turn off. So you'll notice that that didn't really change much of anything in here, but in this div tag, what I can do is if I click on that div in the code, it's processing here, so just a moment. If I click on this div in the code, I can come down here and select a class. So I'm going to select the class disclaim, and now you'll notice that it changed. It centered it, and it grayed out our text.
And you chose what class?
I chose the disclaim class. It's the same class that we created earlier. So if I click in here in this div, in the class, you have a drop-down list of all the classes that you have available in this document. So disclaim is the only one that we made. So that's the one that's used.
Okay.
So I'm going to save this. Now I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to create one for our navigation panel to put that image back in the background. So I'm going to come over to my CSS styles. I'm going to create a new style, and I'm going to call this nav for navigation. And so now it will prompt me to set all of this. So for background, this time I'm going to set my background image as that navigation panel that we created. So you just click OK. Background repeat, I'm going to say no repeat. I want it to appear once and stay where it is. Now, the next important thing is to set our width. Actually, first we can set our text color, so we want this to be white against the background. And then in here, we want to set our height and width so that it matches what we had before. So our width was 233, our height was 177. So that's the same size as that image. So basically we're trying to contain everything within that image size is what we're going for here. So I'm just going to click OK. And in here, I'm going to click, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to have to be in the code for this. I'm going to create that div tag, and then at the very end of all of my content here, after contact us and before the table cell ends, that's where I'm going to close my div. And then I'm going to click inside. You might need to refresh this. It basically updates the view here. So I'm going to click in that div, and then my class that I'm going to set this time is going to be nav. So somewhere in here, I've got an extra A tag. Oh, my div was in the wrong place. That's what happened there. So the div needs to start immediately after the table, and that paragraph tag was automatically put in there, and we don't want that. So when I click refresh, it should update all of that. So you'll notice that our navigation panel is in there. Everything looks pretty good except for the fact that our colors are not showing through on the navigation, and our navigation text isn't in the right place. So we can go back in and we can edit this style. So to edit this, we want to go down to our padding and make sure that we have enough padding. So I'm going to put this 20 pixels in. So that should move everything down. So you can actually stand to add a little more from the top there. So we're going to go ahead and go with 30. That should work. So for the top, we're going to change that value. So all of this is some trial and error, really, just to get everything positioned well and get it oriented the way you want it oriented. So the next step in here is we need to change this color to white. So we can either do that with classes or we can apply it to the A tag. My one caution on just applying it to the A tag is if you have any other links in your content, they'll end up white. And if you have a white background, they won't show up. So in that case, you would actually want to define a new class for it. But since we aren't going to have any other links within our page, I can go ahead and set my color to white right here. And when I click apply, all that text should be white. So now, when I save this, I basically have a version of what I set up in my initial design. Make sense?
Yeah.
So now the only other thing you have to do is fill in this content over here. So that's just a matter of typing in your text, adding in your images, etc. So then your index page is done. So I'm going to type content back in here because I'm going to show you another trick real quick. So now this index page is done and ready to go. So your next step, once all of your formatting and everything is done and the only thing you have left to add is your content, you're going to start cloning your pages. This is where that navigation is going to take shape, because now I'm going to say this is shark.html so that my shark punching page is live. And then I'm going to save this as my commandeering page. So now the commandeering page is ready. Now I'm going to save this as my treasure hunting page. And then finally, I'm going to save it as my contact page. So the beauty of doing this is that each of these pages is ready to go, and all you have to do is fill in that content section, and your whole entire site is done and ready to post online. So how cool is that?
That's pretty good. I like that. You are going to have this recorded where we can watch it again?
Yes.
Will that be on the, where will that be located?
I'll post a link in the announcements, and I'll send out the link for you to watch it after the fact. So,
like I say, I made quite a few notes on a few things, but once I get started, you know, I may get a little confused on where I was at. Just